to The Zone. It's really a pleasure to be here with my dear friend, Jesse Carmichael. Jesse, many of you will know, has been with a little-known band called Maroon 5 for many, many years. And before Jesse presents the record that we want to present today, I want to ask him a little bit about his history with the band. Can you tell me, Jesse, how did you guys get together and when did you get together?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me down, Joe.
Absolutely, a pleasure.
We started the band in high school, in 7th grade in Los Angeles, Brentwood High School. Mm-hmm. Adam, Mickey, and I met and started playing music together really in 8th grade. And then in 9th grade we met our first drummer, Ryan Dusick. He was 2 years older than us. And we called ourselves Cars Flowers.
Cars Flowers, right.
And that band lasted all the way throughout high school. And we got a record contract while we were still in high school, recorded an album our senior year, went on tour as soon as we graduated, and the album flopped. But the label had agreed to do 2 albums with us. They didn't want to do the second one, so they gave us money to leave. And we took that money and we were able to live for a year and a half while we kind of figured out what kind of musical identity we really felt comfortable in, because we had been growing up since the music that we wrote in high school, and Adam was really starting to sing more like Stevie Wonder, and I had found a copy of Herbie Hancock's Headhunters in a stack of CDs that we got from different record labels where they would let you into their vaults to choose CDs when you were going to check them out. And so that was on a desk at a house I was living at, and I put it on in the CD player, and I remember just thinking like, oh my God, this is mind-blowing. So those influences started to come into our music, and we met our guitar player James Valentine around that time and decided to change the name to get away from the failure of Cars Flowers.
Right.
And Maroon 5 was born, and our album came out in 2002, and we hit the road.
So what were your, when you guys first got together, what were your musical influences? And the reason I ask, I should tell you that, Jesse and I have known each other 4 or 5 years now. And when he first came down, I knew Maroon 5, but I'm an old guy, right? And I knew the band, but I didn't know all their material. And I thought, cool, okay, this rock and roller is going to come down, and it should be interesting because I have a lot of classical, I have a lot of jazz, I have some rock. I don't know if I'm going to have any music he's going to be into. So Jesse comes in, and the first thing he wanted to hear was Horace Silver.
Oh, yeah.
And that definitely got my attention. I thought, you know Horace Silver? How's a rock and roller know Horace Silver? And that day, I think we went into Arvo Pärt, a brilliant composer. We went into some Miles Davis. Jesse wanted to hear Bach. And my mind was blown because I realized, my preconceived notion of who you were was totally incorrect, and that your musical taste ran incredibly wide. So I'm curious, what were you guys when you were like 16, 17, what were you into? You knew enough to get into Herbie Hancock. What were you guys listening to?
Well, I grew up being very interested in classical music. That was my first love, musically. And then as I got older, I got into the bands from the 60s, like the Beatles and the Stones and Simon and Garfunkel and the Who and Led Zeppelin, and all these bands started to really influence us during high school, in addition to all the bands that were out at the time, like Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and all the grunge bands. Those were big for us. And so it was sort of like a combination of the grunge stuff with the classic rock stuff. That was our first band's sound. And then we went through phases where we would kind of just pick things out from different bands. We would go through an Oasis phase and a Black Crowes phase, and sort of as we got into bands, we would sound like them for a few weeks at a time. With a few batches of songs we would write would have that feeling.
And you guys were composing right from, I mean, as a teenager, you were composing.
Yeah, as soon as we started the band, we were writing songs.
And who did you guys collaborate? Did you write the songs together? Was it primarily you and Adam writing?
Yeah, and Mickey wrote some stuff, and our drummer Ryan wrote stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty collaborative in the beginning, and then things started to kind of settle in Maroon 5 land with Adam and I, and James and Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Those were sort of two combinations of things where James or I would have a chord progression that Adam would write lyrics and melodies over.
Now you've got your own projects. You've got a project called 1863.
Yeah, that's my solo project name for anything I do on my own outside the band with any combination of people. The stuff I've done so far, I've recorded stuff with our friend Jason later,
Mm-hmm.
and Adam McDougall, and brought in string players and horn players. And so the concept of 1863 is that it's totally open-ended. It can be any style of music, any combination of people.
It's Jesse Carmichael's world, basically.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's music's world. I'm just hanging out in it.
Cool. Yeah. What does that mean, 1863? Where'd that name come from?
It came from the inside of a shirt that I got from a gift tent once. Just a random shirt. I don't even know why I kept it. I didn't really even like the shirt, but on the inside, I noticed one day there was some writing written on the inside of the shirt, and it said, 1863, Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation.
Cool.
And I was looking for a name for side project stuff at that time, and I love numbers too, and so all those factors, the serendipity of it and the concept, at the core of it, being freedom and taking steps towards freedom in every way. It's
Awesome.
A beautiful inception moment.
And what are you working on now? What recent projects are you doing on your own?
I also have a side project with Jason later
Mm-hmm.
called the Circuit Jerks, which is a modular synth side project.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen those beastly
I
machines.
have. Yep.
And we've done some remixes of some Maroon 5 songs and some redos of that old Brazilian tune that the Western world knows as Brazil.
Oh, no kidding.
And some other instrumentals. And we're just putting out an EP soon on iTunes, so check it out. Circuit Jerks.
Jesse, when I contacted you about coming into the zone, I asked, what record would you like to present? And you immediately said, Talk Talk's Laughing Stock.
Immediately.
Yeah, it was no hesitation. And I was like, yes! Because it's an amazing record that not that many people know about. How did you first hear about this record?
I first heard about this record at Jason Later's house. He played it, and I was
We should explain
enthralled.
who Jason is. Producer, bass player, you know better than I, but has worked with Maroon 5, Elvis Costello, Jenny Lewis, and
Julian Casablancas solo album.
right.
A lot of great stuff. He's doing a lot of fun stuff now too with James Blake.
Right.
Great stuff.
Good friend of ours, and is going to do a future. Hey, Jason is going to do a future episode of The Zone. So Jason turned you on.
He did. The first time I heard of Talk Talk, aside from the "It's My Life" song, which was their big hit in the '80s, was on tour with our yoga teacher for the band, Chad Dennis. A great man, great teacher, great music aficionado. And I remember being in Europe somewhere, backstage in some dark room, and he put on Spirit of Eden. And I said, I've never heard this album. And the mood was kind of building, and we were listening to that Mark Hollis interview today where he talks about the first two harmonica notes you hear.
Yeah.
And he said, that sums up the essence of Spirit of Eden. And I totally remember hearing those notes for the first time and thinking oh my God.
Yeah.
And the trumpet sound and just all of the texture of that album. But that was a moment that kind of passed for me. I just remember being enthralled by it, but it wasn't until later when I put the pieces together after Laughing Stock, going back and listening to the albums in their entirety, that I really got the sense of what an amazing thing Talk Talk had done as a band.
And we should make clear that Spirit of Eden is the Talk Talk album before Laughing Stock, which was their last album. The band broke up right after that record, I believe.
And what a great way to go out.
What a great way to go out. So this band, when they started, what I know about them, and you can help me here, but what I know about them is they were kind of like, in fact, they toured with Duran Duran. So you have these two bands with two names, Talk Talk, Duran Duran, and their music kind of sounded like that.
Sure, that was their family, their wheelhouse, musically speaking. And I'd love to know more about what their early beginnings were like. I still don't know much about that, but I do know that there seemed to be this progression from the concrete into the abstract
For sure.
this band.
For sure. Primarily Mark Hollis, who is the primary songwriter and leader, singer of the band.
Yeah, what a deep guy, man.
No kidding. Talk a little bit about what, how he evolved that music for the band, because it's an interesting journey he went on.
He seems like he's a real philosopher in terms of process and trying to get at the heart of something in a roundabout way. You know, I think he had a vision in his mind of a certain feeling, a certain like ambient kind of textural, atmospheric feeling that he wanted the music to evoke, but the way he went about achieving it was very paradoxical, because it was sort of like an organized chaos that he created in these studio sessions for these albums.
With lots of improvisation, you know, almost, I hear it and I hear jazz elements, but it's not jazz. It's, in fact, I don't know how to categorize it.
Which is great. We shouldn't even try. I don't think he'd want us to. And I think it's interesting to learn more about the process, which we have been doing in the last week, going deep down the rabbit hole of what Laughingstock is. It's one of those mythic albums that has a lot of mystery around it. If you look on the internet for Laughingstock information, you're going to find blogs with incorrect information on them, and you're going to find interviews that are so inspiring, and you're going to maybe come across Mark Hollis talking about Laughingstock, because there's definitely a YouTube link, which you guys are going to put in all the links, of Mark Hollis talking about Laughingstock. It's 19 minutes. However, this comes from a tape cassette that came out in '91 to accompany the album that's 60 minutes long, of him talking about the album with little musical excerpts. But we can't find it anywhere. It's not on eBay. So how great is it that in this day of instant gratification,
even that mystery remains. It's like many things associated with these last two records of Talk Talk. I mean, there's an album that I have here that is different than the one Jesse has at home. Everything with Talk Talk gets murky. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, you can't look right at the sun.
Yeah.
So one thing that we discovered listening to Mark talking about the making of the record was this process that they went through, where they would play only certain tracks for the musicians that had come in to improvise, and they would let them play for hours and hours, and then they would go back and sift through 10 hours of bass parts to choose one note from one bass player and then one note from another bass player's 10 hours and one from a third, and come up with these 3 lines that help them structure the chord progression and loop them and sample them. And technically it sounds fascinating. Do you have any info on what the engineer Phil did to sync up all the tape machines? And
well, so yeah, we've been in contact with Phil Brown, who is the engineer who did both Spirit of Eden and Laughingstock. And first of all, he mentioned that I asked, were there photos of the sessions? And he laughed and said, no, because we did all these sessions in almost total darkness. We had incense going, there was no lights, except for the occasional strobe that would be turned on, which made it very interesting for Phil as an engineer, because the strobe was in the control room. So, and he said this went on for 9 months and was as close to insanity as he could ever imagine getting, while at the same time, he said it had a curiously calming effect on him. So when you talk about total immersion, this sounds like it.
Yeah. It's the music equivalent of Werner Herzog making that Fitzcarraldo movie that there's that great documentary about, with the relationship between him and the lead actor and all the madness that went on. But you shoot for something, you know, immense, and it's not always going to be easy. And so I'm so grateful that people push themselves to these limits and reach these states so that we can then have an album to put on that kind of transfers that heavy hypnotic vibe to us as we listen to it. Because every time I put the record on at home, I kind of sink down into my couch and just feel like I don't want to turn it off. I want to just listen to what's going on.
Right. Same here. It's you know, and talk a little bit about people say, well, what happened to Talk Talk? What happened to Mark Hollis?
Yeah. It's like J.D. Salinger or any other figure that kind of like removes themselves from society and creates this legend around themselves. That's how I think about Mark Hollis right now. He's like Luke Skywalker on this island. We've got to go find him.
So Jesse, tell us a little bit about. So they did 3 records before this? Is that right? Is it 3?
I don't even know how many they did before.
But you know, okay, imagine a band that, you know, they're huge hits. They're making huge hits. You know, 2 million, 3 million selling records, and they're with the label EMI, and then they go in to make Spirit of Eden, and the stories we get are that they got this budget, they go in, and they emerge, whatever it was, 6-7 months later, they let the label hear it, and the story I got from Phil was that the person at the label said, I can't be in the same room with this record.
And then the record label sued them.
Right.
For, I think the term was technical incompetence, but it basically meant that they didn't deliver a product that the label could sell.
Right.
And that suit was thrown out of court by a nice judge. Phil explains in an interview online I read last night. But that did lead to a clause being put into contracts for record labels from that point on that demanded a certain amount of commercial accessibility.
Right.
Which is crazy, you know, like to try and put a restriction on an art form is, well, I shouldn't say crazy, it's, you know, it makes financial sense.
Sure.
But it's limiting in some way. And so in that sense, I don't appreciate it.
Well, and in this case, you know what's funny about both of these records is, so one was done, Spirit of Eden is 88, Laughing Stock is 91. They don't sound dated at all. Like they could have been done yesterday.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, what did they do? They made this timeless music and got completely put down for it by the label at the time. Even after Spirit of Eden, and they changed, they went to what label?
Verve.
Went to Verve. And Verve gave them this unlimited budget to go make what they hoped would be a commercial masterpiece. And they turn in Laughing Stock, which is a masterpiece.
Exactly.
But it starts, well, you should talk about how it starts.
It starts with 18 seconds of near silence, just the tiny vibrato of a guitar amp before the first chord comes in. And on my pressing, like I said, I can't even really hear the vibrato until the chord comes in. I think they might have bumped that up later on a CD mastering. But it's just an incredible experience to listen to the album.
I sometimes listen to it imagining I'm, you know, the suit at the label going, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah.
But it really, we urge you, you know, anyone that sees this, and hopefully we've convinced you, but urge you to go find these records. I can't imagine anyone listening and not being completely enthralled by both records. Laughing Stock and Spirit of Eden. Check them out, search them out. Jesse, man, thanks for coming to the Zone.